This week, Fatih Karayumak will discuss risk transfer with engineering-based cyber insurance, as well as a splash of ICS and other topics in our first interview. In the security news for this week, lessons from Star Wars on threats. More than just your thermal exhaust port. Pegasus spotted again. Python replaces JavaScript. Read-only container malware breaking out of captive portals. It's always DNS, except when it's not DNS, but this time it's definitely DNS with UCLibc. You're ordered to block these sites. Ransomware still hurts. DoD contractors remain vulnerable. Hiding in network appliances and quiet exit. All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly. For security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly.
If your websites conduct transactions or collect sensitive data, you have a material risk on your hands that could cost millions. The client-side security gap is being exploited daily with attacks like digital skimming, credential harvesting, and form jacking. 98% of sites use first and third-party JavaScript to power and enhance the user experience, opening up the client side to the adversary. Unlike most things in security, there is an easy fix. Start by understanding your risk. Let Source Defense give you a site-wide risk report this week. Visit securityweekly.com/source defense.
And welcome to the show, but let me be the first to wish you, may the 4th be with you, Mr. Paul Sidorian.
Welcome everyone to Paul's Security Weekly, where we have lightsabers. It's episode number 739, recorded on May 4th, 2022, right here in G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island. To my left, Mr. Larry Pesce.
Howdy, and for the clarification, we only have one light. No, we do have another lightsaber.
Oh,
it's just
that one doesn't. That one doesn't work.
It's just a hilt.
I got it. Yeah, it's just a hilt, and it doesn't work. I ordered a blade for it.
Yep.
And I have to repair the electronics inside of it. I may be enlisting your help with that, Larry, depending on how severe the repair will be.
Not a problem.
Thank you. To Larry's left, Mr. Dr. Doug White. Mr. Doctor. Dr. Mister.
Mr. Doctor's my dad.
Over under. Dr. Doug White is here with us. Welcome, Dr. Doug White.
Yes. Hello.
Hello.
After all that, I don't know what to say. Pass the scotch.
That's scotchy. On the lines remotely, Mr. Tyler Robinson is here with us. Looking mighty fresh, my friend. I can tell you got a haircut. I can tell.
Always fresh, buddy. Especially when Dr. Doug is helping perform lightsaber repairs with Larry on your lightsaber. So.
That's right.
We should do that like that server thing. That started off with a hammer. So, yeah, that could be a pretty good.
I watched the YouTube videos on how to tear them down and replace ribbon cables and connections and stuff like that. Yeah, it's
rebuild your own lightsaber.
Rebuild your lightsaber. Yeah. Mr. Josh Morpet is here with us. Josh, welcome.
I'm terrified to think of the euphemisms that would be Doug and Larry tearing down a lightsaber and working on it.
It would kind of be like golf. There would be a lot of innuendos. To be
I could only imagine. There would be innuendos. Yeah.
Your bald head is looking very smooth and shiny tonight, Josh. It's very nice. It's very distinguished. I like it. It's very distinguished. Yes.
As is the gray in his beard.
That too.
Ooh. Yeah, that's what male pattern baldness was saying was here. Let's be distinguished.
That's right. That's how you put a good spin on it, man. That's, every once in a while I'm good at marketing. Security Weekly listeners, save $100 on your RSA Conference 2022 full conference pass to the RSA Conference. And the RSA Conference will be live in San Francisco, June 6th through the 9th, 2022. Security Weekly will be there in full force at the conference, delivering real-time live coverage and interviewing some of the top speakers and sponsors at the conference. To register using our discount code, please go to securityweekly.com/RSAC 2022 and use the code 52UCyber. We hope to see you there. If you have a specific guest or topic that you'd like us to cover on one of the upcoming shows, please submit your suggestions for guests. securityweekly.com/guest. Complete that form. Tell your friends and family we're looking for guest suggestions. I guess we are, but some of the shows are really full right now. So make them good, and maybe we'll make room for them. Joining us for tonight's interview segment, Fatih Karayumak. Fatih started his IT security career in academia, then worked for various government and military agencies, including NATO. Fatih, welcome to the show.
Hey guys, may the 4th be with you all.
Yes, may the 4th be with you as well.
And it's always that line after "May the 4th be with you," and also with you.
Gotta be.
I'm not even Catholic.
I know. It's amazing. Fatih, it's nice to have you, albeit remotely, on the show tonight, right? It's nice to have you here. Fatih, how did you get your start in information security?
Yeah, it's actually in high school I got interested in the whole paradigm of cybersecurity, the hacker culture, reading up on it. And during college in Germany, I got in touch with CCC. I don't know if you probably know Chaos Computer Club. So, I started attending their meetings and, started hanging out with the guys. And I selected my major also accordingly. I selected informatics. And while studying computer science, I continued reading up on cybersecurity and also started working as a junior pen tester in one of the very small firms in Darmstadt, Germany, which is a very small college town near Frankfurt. After that, I got offered a position as a researcher in one of the new research centers, a cybersecurity excellence centers called Center for Advanced Security Research Darmstadt, which I gladly accepted. And I started researching usable security, if you would believe it. So we tried to find out how to bring together usability and security.
Not possible. Not possible, Fatih. Is that what you concluded? Like, it was a really short paper. We tried to bring together usability and security.
It's impossible.
Not possible. Move on.
There you go.
Is that really I'm sure there was more to it than that, but...
Yeah. I mean, the usable security thing is the entry to the whole world. And we start working on, how to basically get people understand security. So the lay person to understand what security is about and how to basically securely deal with a computer or with the internet. So that's the other part. And the focus that I had was internet vaulting. So getting people to understand what end-to-end encryption is and how internet voting is actually conducted in a safe and secure manner. So that was my security interest in the academia. And after that, I joined as one of the founding members of a national security agency back in Turkey. So I got the invitation for it and I went over there. I worked with various government agencies, and part of my responsibilities was representing Turkey in NATO as part of the cybersecurity liaison. So we designed and conducted 2 cybersecurity exercises every year. So I took part in that in NATO for 2 years straight. And after that, private sector and dealing with cybersecurity issues for a fintech organization. And I came to US and started working in a large commercial property insurance company trying to create a better security for their clients. So we are trying to basically improve the risk posture and general risk when it comes to cybersecurity and trying to give them best practices. Understand their posture first, understand the risk, and then offer recommendations to reduce the risks for our clients. So that's the short run of my career.
Fatih, I do want to dig into the strategies and tactics for bringing together usability and security. And
sure.
I think specifically, in your research, did you study whether the security of a product can be used to entice more people to adopt said product? I feel like 20 years ago, probably not. I feel like there's more of that going on today, but I'm not conducting any kind of scientific studies on that, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of a feeling. Yeah.
So it wasn't actually even a consideration at that time when I was doing that research. So people who were coming up with security products didn't have that mindset of, okay, how to make security accessible for the layperson. So just an example, think about the security warnings that you get in a web browser, like Chrome, Firefox, or whatever. Think about you go to an unsecure website, doesn't have HTTPS, and you are trying to do trying to send out passwords, right? You get a message. So that message, what kind of message does it carry over to the user, to a layperson? Would he or she understand that message and act accordingly? So that's the main question that we were trying to figure out. So how to make that usable in a sense, so that people, first of all, understand. Second of all, based on their understanding, act accordingly, act securely. So even today, unfortunately, we are still dealing with the same problem. So when it comes to passwords, how do we convey the message of having a strong password rather than repeating the same thing, just incrementing a number as an example? Or how do we give them a good understanding of when they are dealing with the bank, multi-factor authentication, and how to go about it? What's the secure way to do that? Why they shouldn't share anything with other people or share the same password with different accounts that would cause password stuffing attacks, right? So all of these things are major concerns for this research topic, usable security. On the other side, the product owners, the people who are creating security products, started nowadays thinking about the problem as well. And I hear major corporations started hiring psychology majors, like psychiatrists, to think about that. So to research on what would users basically perceive when they use that product in terms of the security aspect, how to use it securely, right? So we are on the right path, but there's tons of research that needs to go into this. And we basically need to get security and not understood just by the experts, but also for the layperson as well.
Fatih, how do you feel about a rating system? I interviewed someone a while back, and they were had created a rating system for consumer, I think it was IoT. It might have been limited to just IoT devices, but really could be any technology device. There was a rating system that was representative of how much security testing and security controls were put into that particular product. Do you think that could persuade someone to purchase router A that has a 5-star security rating versus router B, which has a 1-star security rating? I mean, we would obviously, as security nerds, we want the more secure one, right? But most people, they base their purchases off of price is the number one thing.
I mean, I think it depends on what kind of user you are dealing with. Like if it's like a really lay person who doesn't understand the implications of security, I think it's a hard sell to just, print out some scoring thing that would fly over their heads, I think. But if you're dealing with a security person whose main focus is understanding the security and how strong the security is, those kind of approaches might work. But it needs to come from a credible agency. Off the top of my head, MITRE actually conducts these kind of security tests for security products, right? And they are testing them in independent environments, and they are basically trying to validate, whatever the product owner is claiming for that product. I think one aspect of it should be also usability. Okay, everything that you claim for the security is correct, so let's put a tick box over there. So let's also look at, is it usable for the end users, be it a security professional or some other lay person. So let's test for that as well. Let's hire a psychology person and maybe do a usability test with 10 or 100 people, put them in front of the product and see if the product is actually usable in a sense, is whether it's intuitive, whether they can understand the underlying security paradigm. I think that's a really important thing that we need to look for as well going forward. So think about a SIM product. Okay, it might be the best product that you can imagine, but if it's too complicated, too convoluted, even for like security analysts on like level 3 security analysts, right? What's good for that product, right? Even if it's a perfect product, if it's not usable enough, so there's something lacking there. And you can project the same idea to like simpler security products. Think about a password manager that everyone is supposed to use. If it's not usable enough for the layperson, then what's the point? So we need to start asking these questions, and maybe also the testing agencies like MITRE maybe need to put like a testing column for usability as well, in my opinion.
Yeah, and the problem is finding the right standards body or organization. It's not, we recognize MITRE.
There is none.
Right? But what do consumers recognize? I mean, many consumers probably don't recognize UL. Like, no. I think they just kind of accept that when I purchase a TV, like that there's some stuff that other people do that make sure it doesn't set fire to my home when I hang it on the wall, right?
They don't even know what
it is.
Which is
why there was the outrage for the hoverboards. Remember the hoverboards and them causing fires because the Chinese hoverboards were just blatantly catching on fire. And damn it, what was that other one? How about the Chinese dog food and the baby stuff that was killing dogs because it had melamine?
Yeah. There was some dog. I have dogs, so I've seen a few dog food warnings like that. Which, I mean, most people would recognize the FDA. Sorry, can't help but laugh. There's a lot of shenanigans. Would they? I mean, a lot of shenanigans from the FDA. But not everything you sell has to be FDA approved.
People just look at the marketing material and it says all new and improved, extra healthy, and everybody goes, "Must be, let's eat."
Yeah, but they'll probably read that, Doug, and go, "Oh, this must be FDA approved." Therefore, because I read on the bottle that it said like this is healthy, and we've done some lab testing, and I think the assumption is that it's FDA approved, but likely it's probably not. Probably not.
I don't think most people go that far.
Even most people don't even go that far.
I don't think so.
Yeah,
I think your nerd is showing.
Do you remember the woman that drank? This is not a well-known case, but there was a woman that drank a lot of smart water to lose weight, and then sued. I think it's Coca-Cola when she didn't lose weight, and they said, "Who's stupid enough to think that?" Or vitamin water, whatever, smart water, vitamin water, one of them.
I was going to say she drank smart water and wanted to get smarter, but she didn't.
she drank vitamin water to lose weight, and there's a lot of sugar in it. So they're like, who's stupid enough to think that vitamin water actually has vitamins in it and will help you lose weight? And she's like, me?
Apparently, ones that don't drink smart water.
I think it's mineral oil. If you drank that, you might lose weight.
Among other things.
Yes.
You may lose everything. But yeah, it's FDA approved. All natural.
So but I think that to bring it full circle back to security, like even if we had a good rating system from a recognizable standards body, people still wouldn't pay attention to it.
At the end of the game, it comes down to whether people can use it or not.
Yeah.
Like whether they understand what they are using, right? So think about like an internet voting scheme. It's being used in Estonia, in Australia, and some cantons of Switzerland for a long time. And there are literal laws in their constitutions that the voter needs to understand the voting system, right? So here's the question. How would you explain the underlying mechanism of like a end-to-end encrypted security voting system to a lay user? It's impossible.
It all starts with factoring prime numbers, Fatih, right? So you
exactly. There you go.
Yeah, they just all tuned out.
Yeah.
Like they're talking about math. Get me a beer. Yeah, no, that's difficult.
That's the only reason why Germany didn't allow internet voting to go forward. So they tried it out, and because of this one very simple reason that the voters wouldn't understand the system at all. It's not white box. So when you're voting with a ballot, you understand, okay, I cast my vote, right. It will go in, somebody will read it, and they will count the votes. That's about it. And there's a chain of custody, so you can follow that ballot and understand where it's going, who is reading that. So the whole thing is transparent. But when the technology comes in play, all of a sudden it's not transparent anymore, right? So at that point, the burden of explaining the whole thing to the user is on product owner, which is, to your point, almost impossible.
Yeah, because trying to explain math to people that they haven't done since I have a son at middle school, and my family was over, and I'm like, oh, it's the Pythagorean theorem. Like, you guys don't remember that? They're like, what? Like, it's amazing how if you don't use that stuff, it's like not completely foreign, but I had to watch the tutorial and go,
squared plus B squared equals C squared.
Thank you. Larry also has children in middle school.
But I remember it.
You remember that? Well, because your nerd is showing, like Doug said.
Yeah, no, I remembered it.
You're a PhD. You're a bad example.
That doesn't mean anything.
Oh, God.
That means I put up with a lot of crap.
They call it piled high and deep? Is that the...
Pile it higher and deeper.
Higher and deeper.
It's the primary trait of...
Yes.
We read that a lot during my graduate school as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's the main thing.
I want to talk a little bit about Ics Security, right? Which is very different from trying to make products usable, right? This is security in systems that we could do those, person on the street interviews where you go up and like interview random people, right? And go, like, would it be bad if a power plant got hacked or whatever, right? And they'd be like, oh, that's like really bad. Like, I think people understand the implications of industrial control systems security, but actually implementing is very different.
And they don't understand the systems; they just understand the high level.
Right.
I mean, how many people really know about all that stuff? And it's like how a chair was made. I mean, it's just like, I don't know. They took some wood, put it in a building, it came out, it was a chair. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the same thing with like a lot of. I mean, if you start talking about SIMs or you start talking about monitoring or networks or anything else, I mean, like at home, even everybody's got some kind of technology at home, but most people just want to see that the green light is on and then get back to what they were doing because they don't have an interest in that.
Well, because I think all of us, or most people in their lifetimes, have experienced a power outage or when the gas service isn't available or something like that, so they can relate it to experiences they've had, underscoring the importance of these services. Doug, to your point, right? When you say, well, when it gets ransomware and the PLCs have firmware that has been, tinkered with,
they're already lost.
Like, what?
It's back to, if you've ever seen that, there's a YouTube, if you've never seen it, it's called How a Plumbus is Made. And
the Rick and Morty?
I beg your pardon?
It's from Rick and Morty, and there's a whole video. There's this weird thing in Rick and Morty called a plumbus. And nobody knows what it's for, but everybody has one. And there's
is that made by the Mr. Niesies?
No, but there's a whole video of how a plumbus.
Mr. Mises.
If you've never watched the video of how a plumbus is made, you should watch it because it's a very good example of this. None of it makes any sense because they just made it all up.
Well, it's Rick and Morty. So
they just made it all up. But it's actually a really good analogy for this because even when they're explaining it, they're like, and then the screech is shaved, and you're going, the what? Because it's just all made up, right? So it's exactly how that. I've had students watch that because I'm like, this is exactly what it sounds like when you start using all this jargon and verbiage to people that don't know it. Just like if a neurosurgeon came and started talking to you about dural sheaths and stuff, and you don't know what any of that stuff means, so you have to find a way to translate that to something people can comprehend. Well, whatever it is.
It's myelin sheaths.
I'm not a neurosurgeon, so sue me.
Yeah, about the ICS, there's one more thing that is quite interesting. So the adversary profile. So with the IT security, we are dealing with a whole range of different profiles. So we have sophisticated attackers, yes, sure, especially with the ransomware and ransomware as a service. We are seeing very sophisticated groups, but we are also seeing activists, script kiddies, all sorts of people, right? But when it comes to ICS and ICS security, now we are talking about nation-state sponsored hacking groups and hackers. So the level of sophistication of attacks, what they can do, what kind of impact they would have is totally on a different level. So what we are dealing with is far, far more serious than all the previous stuff that we are accustomed to. And I'm really happy to see at least the administration started understanding the implications of it. So with the founding of CISA, Critical Infrastructure Security Agency, and so on and so forth, they started paying attention. So I will actually attend to a meeting in 2 weeks in Washington, D.C., which is organized by Department of Homeland Security, and risk assessment and management of industrial control systems and critical infrastructures will be one of the main topics. So we start talking about that, but again, the adversary is on a different level. So we need to step up our game on this matter, understand what we are dealing with. So it's not Columbus and it's a different world now. We got to get out of it and get our minds behind it, and also start thinking about now with the Industry 4.0 rolling out, with the whole change of or rolling out of digital transformations, that's an opportunity. So like 40-year-old legacy systems, ICS systems, are being turned now into whole digital systems, which can be very problematic, with the IoTs being in play, tons of different vulnerabilities being offered to the outside world. But I think it can be also an opportunity for us to rethink about this whole thing, how to do it securely from the scratch, right? So that's why it's really, really important for the governing bodies to think about standards. How do we make people understand, what to look for when they first rolling out factories and trying to connect to IT systems or even cloud. Now it's the big hype of monitoring and diagnostics, right? Understanding what's going on in the factory itself. Yes, do that. It's very important, but do it securely. And how to do it securely, basically it's up to us security folks to think about it and come up with best practices.
Do you think we're past that precipice point where we have that opportunity in those critical infrastructure areas, with seeing the sophistication levels of, even just ransomware groups, not necessarily even the nations, the wiperware and UFEI boot kits, all of these things. You think about supply chain, all of our chips and manufacturing and where everything's coming from. Do you think that is something that we really have to start from scratch, and can we actually accomplish that in each individual vertical within inside of ICS?
It's very challenging. That's a really good question, because everything is like when you think about it from a risk assessment paradigm point of view, everything is dependent on each other. So think about the Colonial Pipeline Act. So they basically shut off the OT systems out of fear of the ransomware, which was on the IT system, would leak over to the OT. So they didn't know, they weren't sure that it wouldn't leak down to the OT, so they basically shut it down. So at the end of the game, the attacker actually, did what they intended to do. They wanted to impact the OT, operational technology, or the ICS, and they accomplished that by the means of ransomware on an ordinary IT system. So to your point, we need to start thinking about this whole thing holistically. So what is connected to what? And how can we secure different segments of the network and make sure if one segment is hit that, we are okay on the other segment. So we don't need to panic, right? Every ICS incident that I see, nowadays, is about this panic that the attack would go from the IT to OT. So think about the IT-OT convergence then, and start thinking about how to prevent the attacker going from the IT to OT. And that's what I meant by starting thinking the whole thing from the scratch. So understand the implications and start coming up with good engineering, in my opinion. So employ best practices. Don't do shared trust between ADs as a very simple measure. So segment your network, monitor it. So basic hygiene stuff, right?
Do you think
Go
that
ahead.
there's a super attitude problem there too? Because when we used to audit manufacturers, one of the first things we ran into was just you would look at this was Sarbanes mostly, and you'd look at our HIPAA and you'd look at something and they'd go, yeah, here's what we've done, here's what we've done, here's what we've done, and it would get down to this OT part. And they would go, oh, yeah, you don't even need to look at that. That's all perfectly safe because it's, A, so obscure and weird, nobody would ever figure it out except some uber nerds. And 2, nobody can get to it. It's completely isolated. I mean, that attitude seems to persist today even.
I totally agree. So people have this false sense of security by obscurity thing when it comes to OT because it is complicated. So we are not exactly dealing with TCP/IP anymore. We are not in Kansas anymore, in a sense, right? So it's different protocols, different components talking to each other on different channels. But here's the problem: the attacker profile that I mentioned, nation-state sponsored, they are actually employing people who used to create these networks, right? Think about 2015 and 16 Ukraine power plant attacks. They knew the systems inside and out, right? So there's no security by obscurity there, right? So absolutely, I agree that this attitude that the OT is offline, nobody can get to it, it's very complicated anyway, it's gotta go. So people are targeting OT, people are nation-state sponsored groups are targeting industrial control systems. On top of it, critical infrastructure. So think about your water treatment facilities, think about your power generation facilities, and think about the implications about the impact, what would happen if they were hit, right? Just the Colonial Pipeline, can you remember, those headlines? People were lining in front of the gas stations, trying to fill their trunks, line it up with plastic and fill their trunks. I saw that. It's crazy. So the amount of panic that it would cause is unthinkable. So we really, really need to think about, how to approach this problem, especially during this age and era with the Russian-Ukraine conflict. Tyler, I think you mentioned wipeware, ransomware that has no decryptors. We started seeing them almost every day being deployed in Ukraine in different government agencies. It's crazy. So it can spill over to the West as well. And if it does spill over, we have a huge problem.
Yeah, the iterative approach of how this plays out, like we've seen all of the data dumps, we've seen the nation states attacking different government entities and bigger business entities, that always eventually starts to roll back into other kits, other ransomware groups, other TTPs, especially with all the CTI, all the threat intelligence that's getting dumped upon with all these new TTPs and variants. That code makes it to GitHub, and there are people that will put that into their kits, and the small mom pa class enterprise are going to be the next wave, which could be a year, it could be a little bit more, it could be a little bit less, honestly. So I think you're 100% right. We're going to see all of these things start to use, and that means everybody has to step their game up, not just these nation states. They're kind of preoccupied at the moment, and I think we're going to see some differences here in a little while.
It's becoming popular, these kind of attacks. Look at the SANS courses. All of a sudden, the last 3-4 years, we started ICS courses being sold like crazy. And that's even an indicator about, what the focus is on, be it from our industry as well as from the attacker point of view. When you start doing the CTI and trying to understand what's emerging, I'm seeing every day a new thing that is popping up on the ICS side, a proprietary malware, a different technique that you can use to transfers over the IT/OT convergence security controls. So I started seeing this much often in the last 2 years, I think. So yeah, to your point, it's becoming the new trend. And we need to gear up.
One of the other things I heard you just say was IT OT convergence, and I think there's a growing convergence of all that stuff because used to, like you said earlier, there was a dozen or more protocols, and a lot of it was proprietary. Some of it was actually literally home rolled, coded by in-house just for that purpose. But I think today you're seeing more like, why reinvent the wheel? Here's a protocol stack that works. Why don't we just use TCP/IP? We don't really need to invent a whole new protocol just for this SCADA system or this whatever. So do you think that's going to drive even more threats because it gets easier?
Yes, and like I said, there's also an opportunity there. So when more people start understanding the underlying mechanisms of what's going on, if it becomes easier to understand, becomes easier to monitor, I think we will have ammunition to protect the systems as well on the other side.
I agree with Fatih. I think people get kind of hung up on that security and obscurity model. Certainly, I think 10 or 11 years ago, I think is when I first went to my SANS ICS, which was a very small conference. Hopefully they're much larger now, right? I think that people get hung up on, well, it's proprietary. There's not a lot of people that use it. It's not a widely publicized protocol. Therefore, the conclusion that some would draw is it's secure. And I'm like, no. Like, what you don't understand is, like, if you're a target, you're a target. And if you're using obscure systems, that just means hackers are going to learn those obscure systems.
Exactly.
I mean, we saw that with Stuxnet from the defender side that had to understand how the PLC instruction sets were put together. They went off and they learned that language. Like, if they can do it, so other people can too. So forget about security through obscurity because it just doesn't work. I like what you said, Fatih, that if we use standard protocols, we kind of level the playing field. We can both attack and defend those, I think, kind of all be on the same playing field rather than worrying about, people aren't going to hack this because they don't know it, which isn't true.
Yeah, very, very simple example, Paul. It's so hard to monitor what's going on the OT network. So there are products. There's I don't want to name any names, but
sure,
major players are in this game as well, trying to monitor the OT systems. But it is hard because availability needs to be prioritized all the time. So doing active scannings and active sniffing of the packets can cause problems. So in that regard, standardizing the network might be actually quite useful in terms of, getting our usual products and usual tools to work in the OT networks as well, going forward. But it's going to take a lot of time because, the systems themselves are very complicated. So in my opinion, the vendors started working on those. And I mentioned, I don't think you missed it, but digital transformation is the key word here. So people are trying to modernize their factories, their warehouses. So they are trying to make everything connected. If you are trying to make something connected, if you are trying to monitor it in a cloud setting, right? They need to speak the same language, all the protocols, all the components. And if they start speaking the same language, we can deploy our usual tools and start doing our blue teaming as well. Currently, blue teaming on an OT network is quite challenging. But going forward, hopefully, if this becomes a reality, we can use our tools as well. On the other hand, to Doug's point, the attackers will gain more traction. So now it's their playing field. Now they can deploy their 0 days that they have found in Windows 11 or whatever, right? In a Microsoft system, a Microsoft server, whatever. If that's also persist in the OT, so that can be also deployed on the OT. So it's a trade-off. So we need to see where it's going.
I think I pretty much agree with you because I think one of the big threats that I used to document a lot on old ICS was there sometimes would be like, oh, old Dan's the guy who built this network, and he's the only person who actually understands it.
Yeah.
And so as long as nothing happens to him, we're good to go, even though there may be a dozen holes in this thing because it's really hard for you to sort of ascertain. But there's a massive set of threats right there as well. So as it's standardized, it means, you know, red teamers can come in and look at it, blue teamers can come in and look at it, and it actually makes more sense, and you're not reliant on old Dan to tell you the truth, which he won't, because he's going to say, no, it's fine, don't worry about it. So I agree with you. I think that convergence is probably
one more thing that I want to mention here, something that we are using currently on the IT security side, which is very challenging on the OT side, is
Oh, Fatih, we lost you there.
Oh, okay. It's not just me.
Yeah. It sounds like it connected to something else, Fatih.
Yeah, sorry about that.
There you go.
There you go. You're back.
I'm back. Okay, good. So, I wanted to mention risk assessment. So, we know how to do risk assessment in IT security, IT side of things, right? Most of the time, it's not perfect, unfortunately, but if done right, we understand the risk, and if we deploy mitigations, we understand the residual risks as well, right? But when it comes to OT, it's almost impossible to do this the way we do it on the IT side. So at this point, I think it's very important to come up with a new methodology to do the risk assessment for the OT networks, for the ICS, for everything below the business network. So in the factories, what's going on. So we need to come up with a new methodology to do these kind of risk assessments and have people understand what they are facing. Yeah. And, when if we understand what's happening, what the risk is, and if we can provide mitigations, I think we will be at a much better place than we are right here and right now.
I wanted
Make
to,
sense?
Yes, and I wanted to take this moment to transition to cyber insurance, because I feel like we could probably fill up the rest of the time talking about cyber insurance.
Yeah, I mean, cyber insurance is a very good method of risk transfer. Talking about the risk, I mentioned risk assessment.
Is it though?
Well, let's discuss. I mean, so if you do the risk assessment right, you understand your risks. Okay, you do your threat modeling. You understand the adversary. You now know where you're gonna hit from, right? And hit by, and then you come up with mitigations, controls. Nice. You implement them. Okay. The best way you can do it, there will still be a residual risk. So with that residual risk, either you accept the risk and hope for the best, no one would come in and exploit that residual risk, or you try to transfer that risk. And one of the ways to transfer that risk is insurance. I mean, you calculate the dollar value of that residual risk and you buy insurance for it. And even if you get hit, you basically made whole from a financial point, even if not from a technological point of view.
How does cyber insurance, the insurers, take into account how hard your adversary is trying? Is that I feel like with car insurance, like that's a factor. Depending on what kind of car I get and where I am, they can maybe...
And that's maybe why you have uninsured motorist insurance.
Right. They can maybe theorize how hard someone's going to try to break into my car. Does that transfer to cyber insurance?
So it does. And it's a very interesting question. So insurance companies started doing that since 2017. Before that, they were underwriting left and right, trying to, get a market share. Hey, there's this thing called cyber insurance. It's very lucrative. Let's get our hands on it. Nice. And what happened in 2017? WannaCry happened. And then NotPetya happened. Mm-hmm. Just very recently, I think like 1 month ago, a court in New Jersey decided to award Merck Pharmaceutical $1.4 billion from the insurance companies based on their losses because of not paid yet ransomware. Again, $1.4 billion, which would be paid by the insurance companies. So now the insurance companies are thinking long and hard about how to underwrite, but what to put in the clauses. And, they also started investing in, understanding the emerging threats, understanding the attackers. And so the market is hardening currently, hardening like crazy.
And prices are going through the roof.
Yeah.
Well, just like
Because
car
of that.
insurance. I mean, if you go buy a $300,000 McLaren and you've got a pretty spotty driving record with lots and lots of claims and 7-8 DUIs, if you could even buy a policy, it's going to be really expensive.
Right.
Doug, how expensive was it when you asked?
Well, let me explain. None of that was my fault, I swear. All those people jumped in front of me when I was coming through that pedestrian zone.
I think we're going to see a big shift from the traditional questionnaire that has been kind of the standard of what cyber insurance is, like taking people's word for it, and B, if you've ever answered any of these, some are better than others, but there are always ways to answer that in which you are being accurate but not forthcoming for the information that really makes a difference.
My favorite questionnaire ever.
Thank you, man.
My favorite question ever was the one that I had. There was one question. The insurance underwriter asked, "Do you have a firewall?" And it was, wait, if it's on the shelf, does it count? They're like, yeah, we don't care. If you have one.
Is that similar to, have you ever run over a pedestrian? Because I realized we just laughed at making a joke about us running over pedestrians, which I'm still laughing because it's just a joke. We're not really
I don't even think that equates to it, because I've seen that very thing where somebody was like certified and they had a firewall and it was marked off on a checklist and it literally wasn't connected. And they said, oh, we didn't know we needed to use it. So I don't even think it's like, have you ever hit a pedestrian? I think it's just like an assumption, that they're like assuming that you've not done things.
It's like the old, Jeff's not here to complain, so use the old PCI stuff where it said, oh, does your traffic flow through a firewall? And yeah, it was a firewall with a hole drilled through it and the Cat5 cable passed through it. Like, yep.
That's a hole in the firewall. That's actually brilliant.
But that's a learning exercise too for insurers, right? Because insurers have to learn, just like they learned about cars and fires and all these other things over time, that initially the idea of insurance is just a risk pool. So I assume, based on statistics, that if I insure 5,000 cars, 10 of them will have horrible accidents and I'll have to pay. But because the other people won't, that's how I cover the cost, by that risk pool. But over time, they learned that insuring some people was a bad idea and insuring some vehicles was a bad idea. And other people, like I'm sure the interest rate or the insurance rate on, say, like an Amish farmer is pretty low.
But,
it's like
here's a problem though. With cyber, it can aggregate.
Yeah.
So think about the scenario where the attackers find like a really nice 0-day, probably on a Windows server, and they started like deploying a really like nasty malware or ransomware or logware, right? And then doing damage en masse. And think about an insurance company which insured like thousands of companies that are hit by the same attack. It's the end game for them.
Well, the analogy I used for that when I was talking about it was a Ford Pinto. Ford Motor Company used to make this car called a Pinto, and it was just a little low-end car. It was cheap. It was, lots of people bought them. And the insurance on it's really cheap because it's a cheap car. And people that buy them weren't like drag racing and things. But then they found out that when somebody bumped it, it exploded. And a bunch of people died in horrible ways, and all of a sudden you couldn't get insurance on those kind of cars because the same thing. It wasn't just one bad driver; it was like a whole, a 0-day essentially.
Yeah, and one more thing that I want to mention is about the questionnaire. Somebody mentioned this questionnaire-based risk assessment. That's a really, really good point. And in my opinion, it's so outdated, and the modern underwriting needs to go over that. So. Insurance companies will at one point or another start demanding more data from inside the systems, just like some auto insurance companies who tell you, okay, if you install this like little chip on your car, your premium will get low, right? And if you drive like sensibly, you won't pay much. The same idea will apply, I think, at one point or another. So
Right, but that has to be,
start demanding more.
That has to be measured and monitored, right? And I'm sure there's different scenarios where, just asking and kind of banking on the fact that people are going to tell the truth is one thing. Like, do you have an alarm system in your home? Like, yeah, I do. And then they get smarter and they're like, is it connected to the police and fire? Yeah, it is today, but do they like come out and check? Is there like an insurance adjuster that comes out every single day and test it to make sure that it actually is connected? And do you have fire extinguishers in your home? Well, yeah, I have lots of fire extinguishers in my home. Now, I make sure that they're all operational and working and charged like pretty frequently because I got like quite a few grills outside and like, I cook on my stove like a lot with the burner grill like that. Yes, I do. And I have 3 kids that are
Somebody's
boys.
setting that fire extinguisher
Someone
off
is
pretty
setting
quickly.
the fire extinguisher. So I'm making sure that I'm prepared. But not everyone does that. Tyler, sorry, you were going to weigh in there.
No, yeah. So much of the good cyber insurance companies are already moving to this. So you're at a point where the risk assessments are just to get in the front door for pre-qualification. In order to get a policy and have a policy underwritten, you have to have the visibility, internal and external assessments. And many of these are actually even taken a step further where there's the ongoing continual monitoring, testing, and you have to be at a certain level based on metrics that, we're trying to predefine for many of these companies in order to make this an ongoing and better assessment. Because really what we're going to run into, and I think we already are starting to see this, is many companies can't actually do business. And this is a problem for everybody. We run into a supply chain issue because in order to be and go through procurement for most major vendors, you have to have cyber liability insurance. And in order to do that, that requires you to get a policy written. Those policies aren't going very fast. And thus the supply chain is breaking down and the process is getting short-circuited by having some write-offs, some legalese, some attorneys that are very good at what they do, and they get an exception put in for right now because there's just no other way to do it. So we're going to have all these companies that have to have and do business between all of the different vendors, but there's no one able to get policies because we've put such stringent care on these things. So we have to kind of time this a little bit as well as move forward in a manner that's not going to put us back in the same place.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to break in here. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Fatih. But after you, I want to talk about it.
Yeah. So very shortly, I apologize.
No.
Because this is a very interesting topic for me. So I think you're absolutely right. Even so, we were talking about government contractors, right? So they will be required to have insurance before getting any job going forward. More to that, you're talking about the supply chain. Absolutely, the big companies will require their thousands of third-party suppliers to have insurance in order to make sure that they are up to a certain standard when it comes to cybersecurity. And because of that, because of the increasing impact of the insurance industry, I think the whole industry will start changing into almost like an engineering consulting kind of approach. So insurance companies will have to understand what the security is all about. So they will have to understand how to do the risk assessment right. They will have to understand how to continuously do it. And they will have to also understand how to put the dollar value behind every control. And they need to communicate it correctly as well. So they need to be able to tell the CEO, if you do these controls, your risk will get to this level, and this is the dollar amount because of that improvement. And here's the catch you have. And if we can achieve this, I think overall industry will benefit from it like crazy, in my opinion.
I think we have made strides though in that cyber insurance is not an excuse or a get out of jail free card from actually doing security. I think when it was first being pitched, people kind of leaned on it as, like I have insurance, like therefore.
Well, they tried to use it to transfer their risk.
Yeah,
and that's
exactly.
You can transfer some liability but you can transfer risk, but you can't transfer liability type
Like,
of thing.
I don't need to get my brakes fixed.
And-
I have insurance.
Right. So this is actually something I want to go on. I realize we're running short on time, but I do want to talk about this for just a minute. One of the things, Fatih, is it Fatih?
Yeah, Fatih. Yeah, thank you.
Fatih. Fatih is that I'm working on is actually I helped write CMMC, which I'm sure you're familiar with.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to rebuild that. I've got a nonprofit that we're building a version of it for the commercial market, so that companies can actually be certified as to their risk. How well they're handling risk and managing risk for a specific library of data. And it's designed around continuous compliance. So actually, I'd like to chat with you at some point, if that's okay.
Yeah, I like the idea very much. But everything's becoming data-centric. So it's important for us to figure out the right data and where to get that. And one last piece. So
Automated.
Again, taking the discussion, automation is very important, but taking the discussion back to OT and industry control systems, we need to also figure out how to get the right data out of these like unknown environments and feed it to the risk assessment as well.
So there's
point, I'm going to repeat it. You need to take this whole thing holistically and understand it as a whole and go forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are actually health measures for OT environments that are not being used currently today. For example, packet timing. There are physical line measures of how healthy the OT system is, and that's to go to the health of the system, not necessarily the security or compliance of it. But you have various measures that are not being used by the typical OT system owner, because the typical OT system owner has the budget of a third grade classroom. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, remember the team?
Somebody mentioned automation. Automation is the key here. I don't know if you would agree on that. But it's
absolutely.
Not like we can go every place manually. You need to automate it somehow.
Yeah, no. The whole system is based upon the premise that a self-assessment has some measure of veritas or truth. An automated assessment has a much higher measure of veritas or truth. And a manual assessment is an even higher truth, but it's a point-in-time assessment. So effectively, while useful for certain aspects, it's useless for an overall holistic view over time. And when you take risk quantification and put it in an over time measurement, it becomes very interesting. And when you have automated systems feeding the risk, being able to do dynamic risk pricing is actually where you're aiming for. And that's what we're aiming at. So
we got to discuss this offline. Absolutely.
We will.
I like where you're going with it.
We absolutely will, sir. This is going to be very much fun.
Fatih, we just have 5 more questions for you. Are you ready to play? 5 questions with Security Weekly. They're silly questions. There's no right or wrong answer.
Go ahead.
3 words to describe yourself.
Patience, diligence, and somehow fun.
If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
Electricity and massive.
Wow. If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
There I was, here I am.
Wow, it's very philosophical. What is your favorite hacker movie?
It's so actually, Mr. Robot is my absolute favorite right now. It's not a movie, but the series.
Sure, we'll accept it.
Yeah, if you accept it, we're good.
Yes. Choose 2 celebrities to be your parents.
Alive, dead, fictional, or otherwise.
Oh, okay. Tom Bombadil gotta be my father. I got it set. And for the mama part, let's go for Lady Jessica from Dune by Frank Herbert.
Oh, man.
Wow.
Oh, nice.
Excellent answer.
We all love that answer.
Sold.
Yeah, there you go.
Very nice.
I got some points.
Fatih, thank you very much for appearing on the show. I welcome you back to the show anytime. You're welcome to come sit in. Yeah, come down to the studio. I know you wanted to be here in the studio, so open invitation, my friend. you can come sit in on the news and just hang out with us and have cigars and some scotch. How about that?
It was my pleasure, guys. It's very nice to meet you all. Thank you very much.
With that, we'll take a short break. Come back with the security news. Stay tuned.